Hi, I'd like to welcome the viewers again to another edition of Bill's Bullpen. Bill's Bullpen, of course, is a program it's intended to give more information on what's going on both in our local community of Bourne and also in the region. And with me today I have two guests. Usually we only have one. And first of all, I want to introduce Colonel Potter, who is the base commander at
Camp Edwards.
Camp Edwards. Always mixed up on that because you don't know if it's Otis Air Force Base or Camp Edwards anymore. And Jake McCumber. And what do you do at the base?
I'm the Natural Resources and Training Lands Manager. So as we refer to it in the Army, the bugs and bunnies.
Bugs and bunnies.
The whole conservation mission.
Somehow or other, I recall my own experience, having similar, names for things. Okay. Now, both of you are here because the base, which represents over 10% of the land mass on Cape Cod, and is also something that everybody has to go by in order to get to the national seashore, deserves to have more information out in the public to find out, what they do. Now, Colonel, I'd like you to talk about the mission, the present mission of, and also a little bit of the history of Fort Edwards. Why don't we start with that?
Sure. I mean, I guess the best, and you brought up an interesting topic too when we were talking about people's impression of the base, Joint Base Cape Cod, or a lot of people understand it as Otis, but there actually are several services that actually reside there, and it's actually split up into several different sections. So I'm the commander of Camp Edwards, and we occupy about 17,000 acres of that base, of the 22,000 acres that is Joint Base Cape Cod. But there's also the Air Guard, which occupies roughly 3, 4, maybe 5,000 acres. They are the other contingent of the National Guard, so we have the Army and the Air. But a lot of people know the base as Otis, and that is really just the air side of it. The Army is Camp Edwards, and then we have the Coast Guard also resides there, as well as active duty Air Force, which is Space Force, or PAVE-PAWS, which is the turbines and the missile defense system up in the northern training area as well. So there's a lot of different entities which encompass, which is Joint Base Cape Cod. We represent Camp Edwards, which is the 15,000 acres in the northern training area, also known as the Upper Cape Water Reserve, as well as about 2,000 acres in Cantonment, which is south of Connery Ave. So that's really how we're made up. Our mission there really for the Army, we are a training base. So we're there really to serve the need of the National Guard in Massachusetts as well as the region. But we provide the training space, the training lands, the cantonment space for barracks and different support services that these soldiers need in order for them to train for both their mission domestically. So if we're going to do, and you've seen that quite a bit, whether we're driving buses for the governor, whether we're putting shots in arms, whether we're responding to domestic disputes, whether we're responding to storms in the region. That is something that we train for on the base, but we also train for our federal mission, which is when we are activated by the president and we deploy overseas, which we do quite a bit. So we deploy about 20% of our force in the Army National Guard every year, and we deploy another 20% over the past 3 or 4 years during the COVID times, for domestic missions too. So about 40% of our force is actively serving at any one time, on whether it's the federal or the state mission. So I know a lot of people have the impression that the base has slowed down or shut down in some capacities. We are very active, and we serve a very important need for the Army and the Air National Guard.
Well, small unit tactics don't take up a lot of space, but they do take a lot of intensity for people to understand what that part of it is.
It's good.
There's a question as to you've talked about the internal activities within the base, and I do know that I was involved when I was on the Cape Cod Commission in a study on PAVE-PAWS, and one of the things that you learn, basic physics, is that the square of the distance means a diminution of the application, but there was always this and we used to tell people that you're more at risk for that cell phone that you put next to your ear, because that's the only hole in your head, as far as that part of it goes. But that's not part of what you do, because that's the air part of it.
That's the active Air Force, correct.
Okay. And at 17, I was in the National Guard, and I do remember being dragged down there, back in the day. Yeah, that was a long time
Right.
ago.
Now they're technically called Space Force now, which is,
Space Force.
yeah, so they're a part of the Air Force, so almost like the Marines are part of the Navy.
Gee, and there I was as a kid, a member of the National Fantasy Fan Federation. I fit right in now. Okay, so Jake, it's always been kind of in the opinion of many people, kind of an oxymoron that the military, specifically the Army, would really give demonstrate any tangible interest in saving the environment.
Right.
But you have a job doing that.
I do, and
so how do you accomplish
it's a
your
wonderful
mission?
job. It works out actually very well. And when I go and talk to groups, one of the first things I ask anymore is who's ever heard of Army conservation? And unfortunately, almost nobody has ever heard of it, but it's really an exciting field. And the Department of Defense as a whole is one of the most successful conservation agencies that exists, and whether it's the federal or state systems that we're within. And a lot of that is because we have that mission and because it supports the soldier training. So the focus of Army or any of the other services in Department of Defense is making sure that we can train many, many generations of soldiers to come and not have a negative effect on the landscape. And that's why that conservation exists. How we do it is understanding very well the ecosystem that our installation is in this case Camp Edwards in a North Atlantic coastal pine barrens, it's called, the pitch pine and the scrub oak that we're all familiar with. And then understanding what the training mission of the site is. And I manage a 7-person conservation crew that's focused on Camp Edwards of highly trained professionals in different fields, whether it's wetlands, wildland fire, wildlife, habitat and training lands restoration. So a whole bunch of specialties so that we can manage all of that together. And it's impressive how well the soldier training does work in with the conservation mission, so that we can make sure we've got healthy bird populations, bees, we're out there actively monitoring them and managing the habitat. That same habitat provides great locations for soldiers to do any number of their training tasks out on the landscape.
Well, that was one of the concerns that we had when we first started dealing with the plume, and the fact that although I'm a life member of the Electrical Engineering Society, I didn't understand the process of taking the dirt out of the ground. I'm talking about the plume, and one of the questions I had asked when I was on the Cape Cod Commission was, we know what the area of coverage, but what we didn't know is we didn't know what the depth of it was, because the depth, both of those have a significant contribution to, let's say, to the management of its, or the restoration of the purity, of the water that's involved. And you live in North Falmouth, so
Yes.
you might be aware of the Johns Pond issue. God, I guess it's about 15 years ago now, and that that certainly has been cleared up. And of course, as time goes on, we learn more things, because at the time that contamination happened, nobody thought anything about dumping fuel directly into the ground, not realizing that we have groundwater as an aqua source, as opposed to let's say having a reservoir of some type. So all of those things have been taken into consideration. And I will say that, and I want you to speak about this, Colonel, because I know that in a few days you might not be an active colonel anymore. But
Well, I'll be an active colonel. I'll just be an active colonel somewhere else, but I will still be in this job. But
okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So part of still being in this job is the one thing that had happened back in the dark, distant past of commanders would come, Army commanders would come and would say that, well, they certainly are aware of the problem, but they wanted to come up to speed on it. And then 2 years later, their tour is up and say, gee, we got to move on. So I want you to speak a little bit about that, because I remember when I was privileged to hear you speak at the American Legion Convention, and one of the points that came through was that you were there now as the commander, but you weren't going to leave.
Correct.
So, and this has a lot to do with the confidence that I think the public should have in believing that the concern that they have about what I would call any interruption to the integrity of the environment will be addressed, because there's a continuing supervision
Right.
of it.
Yeah, so I mean it's a good point, and we identify. So I came into this job as the base. I was hired as a base manager, and I was also working in the plans and training office. And it's a little bit of a unique circumstance, I guess, that not everybody fully understands how the National Guard works, especially when you're dealing with a full-time National Guard. So a traditional guardsman shows up on the weekend, does their drills. We'll do 2 weeks in the summer and do further maneuvers in order to be prepared for the state or federal mission. But the requirement is really for a full-time force and make sure that we have all the administrative issues are taken care of and we have continuity. We've done that several different ways. We have an active guard reserve soldier, which is we call AGR. We also have dual status technicians, which is a certain pay status, Title 32. They wear military uniform, but they also follow on to different assignments, so they aren't there for a long time. When I came into this job, that's what I was. I was a Title 32 technician. And as I started to identify what the issues are down on the Cape, on how do we get better, that was one of the first things I identified is we have too much turnover. So we have a lot of tacit knowledge, and it's not like a traditional unit where you expect to have a rotation in readiness. You'll go from high readiness to reset to high readiness to reset, and you constantly go through that. I liken us to almost like a sales force. There's never anything but an upward trend expected. So you have to continually to get better, and you can't do that with turnover. So that's what I posed to the Adjutant General. I said we need to identify positions in which we can make Title V, which is in civilian uniform, so to speak, and we'll stay there for as long as the job is there during the week, that full-time job. But we can continue to pursue our military career as well. So that's what he did. He transitioned me to a Title V position, and that means I will be on the job as a base manager, liken it to a town manager in any one of our towns. Very similar job. I deal with day-to-day operations on the base, but I also provide that continuity for the rotation of those commanders as they come and go. I just happen to be lucky enough to be the commander for the past 3 years. I will be coming out of command next week, and I'll be taking over another brigade command called the 151 Readiness Support Group, which is, ironically, very similar to a base command, a very similar MTO or manning structure. So that's what I'll do for my military career, but I will stay in this civilian career for the time.
One of the things that I recall is that when I was on active duty, although it was many years ago, you left from a base for a deployment, and you came back to a base, and everybody knew where you went, what you were doing. Presently, let's see, is it 40% of the forces are either National Guard or Reserve?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
that's correct.
And that when they get deployed and they return home, everybody figures they were on a junket someplace, even though we were gone for a couple of months. Although, there is that sense when they're pressed, oh yeah, they were in the Army. What we found was locally was that children were being criticized by their peers because their parents weren't available for different kinds of activities. And so the county had started a program, and I believe that it's been carried on by I forget her name, but anyway, I guess she's a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, where children are being recognized with backpacks and, let's say, some types of things to recognize the sacrifice that the whole family makes, in order to understand. And of course, we continue to have the blessing of less than 2% of our population is involved with the military or has any direct connection with it.
Less than 1%.
1%. Okay. Well.
And it continues to wane, and those programs are excellent, especially when we're talking about programs away from active duty military bases. So when we're talking National Guard and Reserve, having those programs in the community, because that's where soldiers get their resources, and airmen, they get their resources in the community. So it's not from necessarily the base, but although we do have programs on the base that we offer, but the majority of them are from the communities that they live in, which may not necessarily be on the base. So it's great that Bourne does that.
I remember when I was in the National Guard as a kid, I was inadvertently assigned to the Inspector General section, which made me a guardhouse lawyer from then on. And I remember years later, when I was a defense counsel, and I had beaten four cases by just invoking the part about you didn't give him you didn't warn him correctly, and he said, I remember the colonel had me come in and said, "You're now the trial counsel." So you know how that goes.
Victim of your own
but the
success.
point was that the National Guard had more resources than the Army Reserve. They had politically, they seemed to be better connected in terms of both accessing the resources that were available in the state, in this case the Commonwealth, and also having access to the federal, whereas the Army Reserve did not have that political clout.
Right.
And it seems to be, I don't think that's changed.
No, and it's just it's a circumstance. You have, the National Guard, belongs to the governor, for unless they're activated, and they belong to the president. So we are essentially federally resourced, but it goes through the state as far as the state gets to use those resources however they need to in order to support the governor as well. So there's vested interest both on the federal side and the state side, whereas the reserves, though they get some of that, but not nearly as much as we do because they don't serve the governor. They are federal all the way through.
Okay. Well, Jake, I don't mean to be ignoring you, but I think that one of the things that would be helpful is whether or not interested citizens could actually come and let's say and talk to you and have a let's say what I'd call an ecological tour of the facility. How would they be able to do that?
Through our public engagement, there's actually advertisements, and I don't know where all those are advertised, where they could find those. But we're doing monthly public tours of the base so that we can show people both the soldier training mission and the conservation mission, and we go through multiple facilities in a majority of the base on that driving tour, talking about the different missions and how they interact very well. And those have been very well received and a real pleasure to host. And so that's a great opportunity. There's a lot of interest in the grassland bird tours that I've been doing. We've already done 2 of those.
A lot of birders on the Cape.
Yes. And actually we get people coming from all over the region, not just even in Massachusetts, to come down and see the grasslands that we manage right around where all of our offices are, and in areas that used to be covered with barracks when there were 50,000 soldiers on the base, and now it supports rare and state-listed birds and a whole variety of moths and things like that. So those unfortunately are so popular, they're filled up, and we're doing 3 more of those, but we'll continue doing those every year.
So the question for people would be, how do they make that connection, or how if they get on the list?
Right.
I can answer. So we have a community outreach specialist called, her name's Kathleen Kolva. So her name, number, and contact information, email are advertised at all the select board meetings, which I just have done recently. The only one that we haven't done yet is Bourne, so that's the next one that we're scheduling. And we also advertise periodically, whether it's in the Enterprise or in the in local papers, Cape Cod Times.
Since this is a what I'd call part of a planning operation, have you contacted the Cape Cod Commission?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they have a newsletter, and I might suggest to you, as a former member of the Cape Cod Commission, and there used to be a direct report when I was a county commissioner, that you talk to Ms. Sanatory and just say to her, that maybe you'd like to have a continuing, line in that to make people
idea.
aware of it, because that's something that does go out to quite a few people who are actively interested in the environment on Cape Cod.
Right, yeah.
One of the things that we always talked about was we do not want to make Cape Cod into Miami Beach.
Right.
So the Cape Cod Commission spent a lot of time and energy, let's say, fighting developers, with the idea the promises of a developer are only worth the first year, because then after the first year their responsibility is over.
Yep.
and the guy that they or the operation that they sell to doesn't have any connection with what's going on. So
Right. That's
so
a great point. Yeah, I mean, just when you're talking about the Cape Cod Commission, we've met with them recently. I know Jake has worked on one of their subgroups in recent, so we have been in contact. But that's a great idea as far as advertising, through them. And I know, really for us, we're looking for the best and most efficient ways of reaching the public, and that's really what our aim has been over the past couple of years. And since we've hired Kathleen, she's done an unbelievable job. So anything that we can do there is
Well,
is
and
great.
part of, I would say, I think you call it District of Regional Impact, and that's the one thing that they work on. I don't know whether or not their ability or their jurisdiction reaches onto the base, but it's certainly something that the community is very concerned with.
Right. Yeah, and all those regional partners throughout the Cape, those are the ones that we work with. We have a vested interest in the Cape, and the Cape has a vested interest in us. So
Well,
it's a symbiotic relationship that we certainly look out for each other's needs, and I think we do a pretty good job of trying to account for them. In fact, when we do the tours, it's always the expectations quickly change when people see what it looks like out there, especially in the northern 15,000 acres, because it is more parkland than it is anything else. There's limited structures. There's mosaic of grasslands and shrublands and pine barren, and it's actually really remarkable when you get out there. And I think basically the first word out of most people's mouths are wow.
Now, years ago there was, and I think the plan still exists someplace, that they wanted to put a road through the part of the base that was abutting the canal, and that road would have connected MacArthur Boulevard over to Route 6. Okay, now, have you heard any noise about that?
I haven't heard any noise on that. There's always different things. There are some, certainly some, we have power lines that run through there. We have, gas lines that run through there, supplying the Cape with natural gas and power. These different easements. I know there's, with the, Cape Wind and all that, there's been talk about different easements for those types of things. But as far as a road, I have not heard of that.
Okay, well, in any case, there's that business of the entity that exists. I'd like to talk a little bit about what contribution does the base make to the economic viability of Cape Cod?
Okay. Quite a bit. In fact, we did a study, and we're actually, General Foe, who's the executive director, he has, I believe it was in the MC Cube meeting that we recently had, he had those numbers. But I mean, the bottom line, we have soldiers that come in from Camp Edwards' perspective, probably about 4,000, certainly a month, probably more on some months, maybe a little less than others. And those,
Is that all year long?
like I said, some months it ebbs and flows a little bit.
Right.
The summer months are generally a little bit more busy.
Of course.
But they go out in the local community, and they're using the local community. We have contractors, for instance, for food and different things that come out of the local community, fuel and all sorts of different areas where we impact the economy. So I think it's a fairly significant impact. And if you look at full-time housing there, the Coast Guard has a significant footprint as far as people that live on base. I know the active duty Air Force also has individuals that live on base. I say active duty Air Force, but I'm not calling it Space Force. That's what they're called now. Space Force has individuals that live on base. And like I said, we have the Army Guard and the Air Guard that both have transient soldiers that are coming to the base on a regular basis that use the local economy. So it's a significant dollar figure for sure.
And
Actually,
substantial full-time staff.
And full-time staff.
Okay. Actually, speak a little bit about what you know about the airstrip, because I understand it can take jumbo jets.
Oh yeah, it's a big airstrip.
So in other words, there was talk at one point of making that having a commercial piece to it, so that you would have air traffic that might originate from the base. Is there any talk of that?
So I mean, there's always talk of that. And that's not really a Camp Edwards function. That would be more Coast Guard, Air Force.
Right.
So the Coast Guard permits that runway from the Air Force, but and there it's a fairly large. It's an alternate landing spot for the space shuttle, so it'll take pretty much anything on
Space
that
shuttle.
on that landing strip. So the maintenance on that is fairly substantial and costly. So as far as plans for it, I don't know of anything that is really substantive, but it's more of an Air Force and Army. I mean, Air Force and Coast Guard.
There is one other topic that has come up from time to time, and that is using some of the barracks to convert into housing for some of the homeless population. And believe it or not, the Cape has a reputation of being very wealthy, but we have a substantial, let's say, homeless population. We also have another issue for affordable housing, and we can call it by different names. One of the euphemisms we use is workforce housing, to get people started, because
Right.
Unless we're willing to pay, let's say for entry-level jobs, $60,000-$70,000 a year, they wouldn't be able to afford to buy the housing that's available here on the
Right.
Cape.
Right.
And in many cases, a lot of people who work on the Cape don't live on the Cape.
Right.
So there's that, and I believe that most of those barracks are in the Fort Edwards part of the facility.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
the majority of them belong to Camp Edwards, and we use them quite a bit. We have quite a bit of capacity, but the barracks they aren't meant for long-term living. They're meant for short-term transient living.
I remember looking through the cracks in the walls
Right.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
And some of them, we're in the process of upgrading those barracks. But I know that it's a common, misconception that, because they see them empty quite a bit, that they don't get used. They get used quite a bit. All the soldiers that come on base on those monthly during the weekends or, for their AT, we use those barracks. There really isn't a lot of capacity for anything other than that. And although a real problem, homelessness and certainly the affordable housing, the answer to that probably is not a military base, just because of access control and the ability to get on and off the base.
Let's talk a little, on the access control. It used to be it was an open base.
Right.
Okay. What's the story now?
Yeah, so it's not open. We have access control ever since 9/11. It really is. It's a DoD policy that we have to control access to the military base. So.
I missed the opportunity to cut through the base in order to get to the other side.
Yeah.
But that was another world.
I mean, we do issue Joint Base Cape Cod passes. There's a vetting process that goes through that, CJIS checks, just like you would for state police or whatever. But there is a process, but we do have the control of the access.
There's an old Sergeant Major pal of mine, Kevin Casey, who was trying. Bill, I can get you on there and get you that pass. And I'm saying, well, yeah. I said the truth of it is the only time I use it is to cut through. So I really don't need it. So
Right.
They have it. So I've already confessed in public about my interest in it. But in any case, it's always important to know about both the restrictions and also the access. That's part of
Right.
it. And believe it or not, we've almost come to the end of this. So I want both of you to give me what kind of a takeaway you want folks to have from this.
Well, I'll go first if you don't mind. The base, like I think I spoke a little bit about this, but I think there is a misconception of the base not really being an active base. And really my takeaway is the base is very active. It's a essential piece of the Army's training and the Air Force training, and the National Guard as a whole for Massachusetts. I mean, that is our primary training site. It serves our needs. We've invested in it. And we really, from a public standpoint and the concern about the environment, I know Jake will touch on this, especially from the habitat standpoint, but we really have demonstrated over the past 20 years that combination of a culture of both training and conservation. And I think that's really important. I think showing the public through tours, through public outreach, and building that public trust again. Like you said, they don't get a chance to get on the base that often. So we want to make more opportunity for people to come on base and see it, because seeing is believing. I think when they see it, like I said, their first impression most often will be wow, and I hope that's what we're able to do going forward.
Okay, and Jake?
Yeah, I love telling people that we do have this overarching conservation mission, and that's throughout the training site. So what people are generally unfamiliar with is that big picture context of what we do. And that Camp Edwards is truly a conservation success. And it's something that we're very proud of and enthusiastic about our role in managing for that long-term health of our Pine Barren system with grasslands and the forest, and how very well it works in with the soldier training, so that we can provide everything that they need so that they can train those soldiers to be safe at what they do and effective at what they do, but also have the best population of the eastern whippoorwill in the Massachusetts, or any number of other species. We have 144 species of bees that we found on the base, 180 184 species of birds, 900 plus moths.
Amazing.
And it's this fabulous ecosystem that we're managing for the soldiers and for that quality wildlife habitat together, and that it's a tremendous success, and it's successful partnerships with agencies and other organizations focused on that long-term health of the site, and that really effective Army conservation mission that we're glad to be a part of.
Well, cover and camouflage depend upon having good, let's say, what I call good vegetation opportunities to, to integrate yourself and practice that, so that when you get into a real live fire, firefight situation, you have been trained in an area that has not been devastated and not been burnt up. It's very important.
Well, although burning it is a very important part of conserving the habitat in this fire-adapted system.
I remember being told that when I first went to California, that the reason why they had controlled burns was indeed to restore the habitat and reduce
Fuel load. Yeah.
Reduce that, which I suspect is the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, and that's another thing that's fun to show people on the tours is how healthy fire makes that landscape and the animals that use it.
That's wonderful. Well, with this, I want to thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks
been
for having us.
very pleasant for me. It reminds me that I did wear a funny green suit once. And again, I want to thank the viewers for for joining us with Colonel Porter and Jake McCumber, both from Camp Edwards here in Cape Cod. You've learned a little bit more, and I hope you take advantage of their invitation to learn even more. It's 10% of the land area of the Cape, and in many ways it's the largest conservation area on the Cape. So with that, I want to thank the viewers again for watching, and you've been watching another production of Born TV.